course, Cenk or John Iadarola with you guys. Anna's away on vacation this week, but please watch us anyway. I mean, look, I know main attraction, etc. But we're trying to hold down the fort. You know, John and I exist. Give us a break, okay? So we do have amazing stories for you guys today. A little bit of fight back from progressives. Okay, we're gonna get to that. And then of course we've got plenty of mess in the show, but also really bad news for Trump. So there's a tiny bit of like, I mean, we're missing the Salt Queen, but maybe it's Sugar Bay that's sprinkling in a little bit of good news here into this show. So having said that, John, take it away.
Yeah, Sugar Bay would definitely be like the patron saint of me, by the way. But anyway, yeah, let's have a little bit of fun being delivered by Bernie Sanders, as you'll see in this clip.
Mr. President, is Joe Manchin negotiating in good faith?
I didn't negotiate with Joe Manchin. I have no idea.
Okay, so that's Joe Biden, and he's been trying supposedly to get some sort of deal with Joe Manchin as month after month after month ticks by, getting on towards half of his first term, likely his only term. And at every single step of the way, either Joe Manchin or sometimes Joe Manchin will tag in Kirsten Sinema, just comes in and destroys the entire thing. And we're all watching this, waiting for something to happen. And we're supposed to believe that something will happen that will get Joe Manchin to act right, to change his mind, or more likely start to ignore his donors. Maybe it will be one more lunch at the White House. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but we understand and have been telling you at every step along the way about who Joe Manchin is, who he is in DC to represent, and thus what we can expect out of this process. Now, some in the media pretend to not understand these very core things. And we're gonna have a demonstration of that with an awesome rebuttal from Bernie Sanders. Let's take a look.
Senator Joe Manchin, of course, abruptly pulled the plug this week on the Democrats'
No, Martha, he didn't abruptly. Martha,
okay. He abruptly on Friday.
He didn't abruptly do anything.
He was
has
negotiating
sabotaged
for a while.
the president's agenda. No. Look, if you check the record 6 months ago, I made it clear that you have people like Manchin, Sinema to a lesser degree, who are intentionally sabotaging the president's agenda, what the American people want, what a majority of us in the Democratic caucus want. Nothing new about this. And the problem was that we continue to talk to Manchin like he was serious. He was not. This is a guy who is a major recipient of fossil fuel money, a guy who has received campaign contributions from 25 Republican billionaires.
So that is Martha Raddatz, and she's, I don't know, maybe she believes it to some extent, but she's trying to present to the viewers that something abruptly happened, that Manchin had a change of heart, that the negotiations fell through at the last minute. And that's simply not reflective of the process nor the personalities. And so I love having Bernie Sanders there in his very characteristic fashion, who is not going to accept that attempt to spin. But Cenk, I had a feeling you'd probably like that.
Yeah, definitely. I loved what Bernie said. It's about damn time. I'm gonna get back to that. I'm gonna get back to Martha Raddatz in a second too, because I think that's relevant. But first, I've got to comment on the Biden clip because it appears to be major news. So Joe Biden never negotiated with Joe Manchin. Senator Manchin sunk Joe Biden's entire agenda, and he never negotiated with him. Nah. Okay, so if that's true, it's massive news, and it is news of enormous incompetence or indifference. I mean, everyone acknowledges. I mean, the Democrats almost brag about how Manchin has sunk the entire agenda. Oh, there's nothing we can do. It's Manchin. It's not Biden. It's not Pelosi. It's Manchin. You never talked to Manchin? You never talked to Manchin. That's absurd. That's absurd. If that was true, it would be the biggest political malpractice of my lifetime. But of course, it's not true. Biden is lying as usual. He's on the record as having talked to Manchin and negotiated with him several times. And you know how Joe Biden negotiates. Okay, Joe, I'll give you everything. Is that good enough? And then Manchin's like, no, because I was never gonna do this. I just work for my donors. And Biden's like, deal. Okay, he doesn't care. He agrees with Joe Manchin. But it is an indefensible statement all of American press should pick it up and go, wait, is this even 1% true? Because it's insane not to have negotiated with Manchin. And again, he did. He's just lying as usual. Or maybe he just doesn't know what day of the week it is. He doesn't know that he's president. He doesn't know that he's on this planet. I don't care. Look, all of you Democrats pretending to catch feelings about, oh, how can you say that about Biden? Really? After all this time, really? Come on, you know it too. He barely mentally competent. Come on, everybody knows that. Do you explain that answer? Manchin, I didn't negotiate with him. I never did it. Oh, okay, well then you're a loser. You're a president who's not in charge at all. The buck stops, I don't know, over there or something. What's the buck? I don't know what the buck is. Okay, total loser. Anyway, now getting on to relevant political figures like Bernie. Actually, first, Raddatz. Raddatz not only does the standard Democratic talking point that she's been handed by the Democratic leadership. Okay, yes, Joe Manchin just had a change of heart. Oh my, all of a sudden decided to pull out. No, he's corrupt. He's been corrupt from day one. But I mean, the very, very, very last people that will find out about corruption is every reporter in Washington who'll be like, corruption? Oh, the billions of dollars? Oh, the billions of dollars. Oh, that affects the politicians. Okay, and she seemed offended on behalf of Joe Manchin with even on Bernie's light criticism. She's like, the whole time she's like, right? Okay, so you can watch the clip. Of course I'm doing hyperbole, but not by much. So now finally to Bernie. Yes. But unfortunately, it's probably too late. But I'll take it. It's always better late than never. And yes, for God's sake, thank you for talking about his donors. And from here to oblivion, all you should talk about is the donors. Bernie, they made you every promise in the book. Your beloved friend, Joe Useless Biden. Every person in Democratic leadership, your other beloved friend, Chuck Useless Schumer and Nancy Useless Pelosi, they're all your enemies, Bernie. They help destroy your agenda. They do it way better than the Republicans do. So maybe he's at least realized that Manchin is not a friend. It's a good start, and he should talk about how they're all massively corrupt, including his beloved friend, super corrupt Joe Biden.
Yeah. You know, they really never should have put those people in leadership. That middle name should have been a massive red flag. But anyway, yeah, Martha Raddatz either doesn't accept the reality that 99.9% of all these politicians are corrupt, or as maybe you would come down on this side, simply will not tolerate open discussion about it. We are supposed to believe that America is better. American governance is better. There's petty corruption all over the world, but not us, not us. There is a difference between our corruption and their corruption. Our politicians are way better at it, because they don't need to just be handed a bag of money under like a bathroom stall. They've made most of it perfectly legal. Like the petty regimes overseas haven't necessarily gotten to that level of sophistication in it. But anyway, in her attempt to dispute the narrative that this could be about corruption, about his own self-interest, she decides to pretend that he cares about his constituents. Let's take a look.
Okay, Senator, okay, you say he wasn't serious, but Manchin says his main goal is to do what's good for West Virginia, and he's worried about inflation. Listen to what he told the West Virginia radio station.
Yeah, and if Bernie has a dismissive tone, it's because it merits nothing more than a dismissive tone. Oh, Manchin says that he wants to do what's best for the people of West Virginia. Yeah, and has she looked into the damage that climate change is going to do to the people of West Virginia? Or even if we weren't just focusing on the climate change element of this, we know how badly the people of West Virginia need a variety of the forms of help that would come in this larger infrastructure bill. It was a big focus of the conversation last year, the percentage that desperately need the added dental coverage that Bernie himself is one of the major advocates for. Is Joe Manchin looking out for them there? No, he'll come up with something. It'll be the deficit until it's not the deficit anymore, and then I guess it'll be inflation. It'll be something abstract that he'll never be pinned down on exactly what number would be acceptable for us to actually help people for. There's always gonna be something like that. He's a goddamn politician, and Martha Raddatz is acting as if it's a philanthropist, as if it's like a guru or something. Like he's just a selfless guy who's looking out for he literally owns a coal company, and she's acting as if he's a grassroots activist, Cenk.
Yeah. So, look, in terms of the charge that Bernie made about the billionaires, just speaking of the donors, so we looked it up. It's true, right? Huge Republican donors give money to Joe Manchin. So Robert Kraft, donor of the Patriots, Ken Langone, one of the worst right wingers in the whole country, one of the co-founders of Home Depot. And then there's private equity moguls, et cetera, right? So tons of massively rich Republicans giving money to Joe Manchin, tons of corporations giving money to Joe Manchin. So, and like today it happens to be Martha Raddatz, but I mean, it's literally almost every single so-called reporter and so-called news anchor in Washington. So she does the same mistake as everyone else, which is, donors, never heard of them. Never heard of them. That affects politics? Never heard of it. Well, instantly, you're the worst reporter in the world. You should retire, but all of you should. And then second of all, Manchin says the good people of West Virginia. Who cares what Manchin says? Why don't you look at the polling? Okay, put aside our views on climate change, be neutral to maybe 99% of the world's scientists are lying. Maybe they're in a global conspiracy. What am I, a reporter? I can't figure it out. So forget all that, okay? And just look at the polling. Do the people of West Virginia actually want the provisions of Build Back Better? I mean, Bernie's gonna get into it right now. I can get you an even longer list than Bernie's, but no, the answer is overwhelmingly, the people of West Virginia do not come close to agreeing with Manchin. They want paid family leave, they want child tax credit, they want all of those things. I can show you the polling. But Martha Raddatz has never seen the polling. She doesn't care. She just cares. Beloved corporate Democrat Manchin has lied. I would like to repeat his lies as if they're true, and then challenge you aggressively with them, Bernie, as if they have any validity at all. Try looking into facts for once in your life, okay? But you'll never find that on mainstream media. Never. In fact, they'll assiduously hide the polling, hide the facts from you guys, and pretend that the most right-wing legislators that are completely out of touch with the American people are centrist and moderate and wonderfully reasonable. Corporate cash. I drink your milkshake. They all drink the same goddamn milkshake. Yeah. They're all liars. So let's let Bernie tear into this one.
The same nonsense that Manchin has been talking about for a year. West Virginia, it's a beautiful state. I've had the pleasure of being there. Great people. It is one of the poorest states in this country. You ask the people of West Virginia whether they want to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and eyeglasses. You ask the people of West Virginia whether we should demand that the wealthiest people and large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. Ask the people of West Virginia whether or not all people should have health care as a human right like in every other country on earth. That's what they will say. In my humble opinion, Manchin represents the very wealthiest people in this country, not working families in West Virginia or America.
Love it. There you go. I wish he'd been doing it from day one of the Biden administration. It might have made a difference. It might have created pressure against Manchin. Manchin is very, very sensitive to pressure. But this is the first time that anyone's beginning to just like tiny bit poke him. And look, it's great from Bernie. I'll take it, and it's by far the best in Washington. You know me, that would be about 5% of what I would say about Joe Manchin on TV.
Yeah, well, and imagine you, Cenk, or you watching this. How would you pressure Manchin? How would you respond to what Manchin is doing if you had been fighting for like 50 years to become president, and then you finally, against all odds, become president, and then, oh no, you don't get to do anything. In fact, and maybe you didn't even want to do anything, but you look so incredibly weak and feckless and incompetent, in no small part because of Joe Manchin. And the most you can pull together in response is, well, I didn't negotiate with him. Jesus Christ. Like, act like this is your life's work, because it is, whether you like it or not. Now, anyway, Bernie identified who Manchin is actually working for. And so let's remind people of that. We're gonna jump ahead to the second graphic. Nation's largest coal producer, Peabody Energy, their PAC donated $5,000 to Joe Manchin just last July. What do you know? They wanted to get out in front of the negotiations over that bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's weird. They gave $5,000 just because they're enthusiasts, they're boosters. It's not to bribe him or anything. And honestly, it seems comical in the wake of it. I don't think they needed to give him that money. The dude was never gonna do anything to stop the earth from burning, but they gave him the $5,000. Here you're seeing, I think, a much more interesting graphic, put together from Senate disclosure forms by Andy Hirschfeld on 2RT Investigates. That's just the dividends Manchin was directly getting each year from Enersystem, so his energy company. The $5,000 obviously is interesting, but we're talking about way larger sums of money right there. And that is not going into his campaign coffers. That's going directly to him. That's money that one can use to buy another Maserati or perhaps another yacht. And indeed, he's done that. Now, he's gotten that under the current regulatory regime that we have for fossil fuels in America. Would he still be rich under some sort of revised one? Sure, he'd be endlessly rich. He could never spend all the money, but that's never stopped a rich person from condemning us all to a fiery wasteland of a future. And so for his donors, also for his own personal investments, why the hell would he allow the Biden administration or any administration to shake things up, to start to do more regulation on fossil fuels, to start to invest and subsidize in getting domestic renewable energy off the ground? Why would he do that? I'm not asking you, I'm sure that you understand that. I'm asking Martha Raddatz. Why would he do that? What more evidence do you need of a person's personal corruption, political and personal, that they would do all of this for the good, I guess, of their donors, but also especially of themselves? The idea that you could look at those dividends year after year and then say, I bet that's a guy who cares about the people living in the holler or whatever. How could you possibly think that? And how could you be paid, I'm assuming, millions of dollars a year to pretend to believe that, to misinform so many people on a network like ABC?
Well, that's why they pay the millions of dollars, so that you could be a good news actor and not a good news anchor. If you were a real news anchor, you'd be asked to leave the premises immediately. They're like, you're talking about the real reason for politics? The massive corruption? All those billions of dollars that go right, by the way, into our pockets, Martha, here at ABC? Mainstream media is the single biggest beneficiary of political corruption in America. The media gets almost all of the money in politics in the form of advertising. That's why they purposely avoid ever talking about that corruption, which has made them all millionaires. Yeah. And maybe Martha Raddatz doesn't know that. And again, it's not about her. It's about every reporter and every anchor that's on. But they're picked to be lapdogs of the powerful and maintain the status quo. Even if they don't realize that, I got news for you. That's why you're picked. That's why you're on television. That's why you get paid the big bucks to not do journalism. And finally on Biden, John, look, why did he try to be president for 50 straight years? We project our decency and our principles onto these people. No, 99% of politicians are terrible people who only care about their ego. Joe Biden's never cared about a policy in his whole life. I mean, he's most animated when he's talking about how much he loves Mitch McConnell or how he had great lunches and dinners with segregationists and my old friend Strom Thurmond and my beloved friend Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell said on Friday, oh yeah, that Chad Meredith, that extremist right-wing anti-abortion judge in Kentucky, McConnell just gave it to me as a personal gesture of friendship. He got nothing back in return. And now Biden has never, ever cared about policy. He doesn't care about you at all. All that stuff about empathy, it's just marketing. It's total nonsense. All he cares about is the people he knows, his beloved donors, his beloved Republican friends, and of course, most important, his giant ego. I am Joe Biden, I have finally become president. What are you gonna get done? Who cares? I have already achieved the pinnacle. It's all about me. And you think he looks weak? I think he looks pathetic. But John, I talked to Bill de Blasio. Some of you might have seen that interview earlier today. He talked about a benign bubble. It wasn't so benign. He said the bubble was bad whenever you're an executive, and he was the mayor of New York City. Now take that bubble and multiply it by 200 around the president. Okay, but Joe Biden, when asked about horrific polling numbers that have him at 33% approval, way lower than Trump was at this time, which is just like literally historically bad numbers. Like around 7 out of 10 Democrats saying, "Don't run again. We don't want Biden." And he's like, he cherry picked one number, and he's like, "What do you mean? I'm super popular." And he probably genuinely believes that, because his whole life he has believed that giving in to Republicans and being called moderate by the mainstream media is the greatest thing on earth and the only honor that you should ever seek out. So he probably thinks he's killing it.
Anyway, that's gonna have to be it for our discussion of Joe Manchin. As much as I love talking about the man, we're gonna take our first break. When we come back, report looking into the non-response, the Uvalde mass shooting. We'll have that and more after this.
All right, back on Young Turks, Cenk and John with you guys. John, take it away.
I, in fact, will. The report released this weekend by the Texas House looking into the basically the non-response of law enforcement during the terrible shooting in Uvalde contains some absolutely devastating figures, some details that make the already horrendous response look even worse. But I don't think there's anything worse than this. The overall description of an overall lackadaisical approach by nearly 400 officers who were there. Different federal agencies, different levels of training, different armament and armor and all of that. But literally hundreds of law enforcement officials. And what did we get out of that army effectively nearby this shooting? Almost nothing for well over an hour. In addition to this report, and we're gonna give you more details from it, the mayor decided apparently unilaterally to release more footage from that day, and here's a bit of that.
New body cam video released by the Uvalde mayor shows the frantic first moments police arrived on scene at Robb Elementary. This video taken by Uvalde Police Sergeant Daniel Coronado as he made his way inside the building. But within moments, more gunshots.
Shots fired inside the building, Uvalde. Take cover, guys.
After taking cover outside, Sergeant Coronado gives his first update on the situation to responding officers.
Okay, guys, he's on inside this building. We have him contained.
But as the minutes continue to tick by, the urgency first seen by the initial response fades away. Instead, Uvalde police officers are seen hunkering down, waiting for more backup. Critical moments pass by at a time children were still alive in the classroom.
Yes, critical moments were passing by, but let's also be clear, many critical moments, something like 77 critical moments during which, although the report will not make this clear, I feel confident saying lives could have been saved, but were not. For a lot of reasons, none of which are acceptable, but take a look at this. According to the report, police who made entry knew there had been gunfire because there was a cloud of debris in the hallway, bullet holes in the walls, spent rifle casings on the floor, but there was no evidence officers had, quote, any contemporaneous understanding as they arrived in the building that teachers and students just then had been shot inside the classrooms. And so they, and this is what we've heard from the beginning, believe that they had a guy barricaded, a suspect that was now locked down in a location, not that he was in there with more people who he potentially could shoot, or those he had already shot that might be losing the precious moments necessary to save their lives. I feel like, Cenk, we've now identified a group of 400 people who didn't understand that those were the stakes, and maybe the only 400 people in America, because, and I could be misremembering this, I felt like in real time, we all knew about that. Were they the only people that didn't get that there were more lives potentially being taken as they scrolled on their phones in the hallway outside of that classroom?
Yeah, well, that goes to the Achilles heel of this report. So understand that the report has some positives in it. Positives as in, hey, it's important to know some of the details of how many cops were there from which the departments, which I'm going to get into in a second because it's very important. And it does talk about how the obviously the response was not good. It was lackadaisical. It uses some couple of harsh terms, etc. Okay, so that's the positive. But now there are three huge negatives. Number one, understand that this is largely an exercise in scapegoating. Because if they really wanted to have accountability, they would hold all of those police departments that showed up accountable. And they would talk about the things that I'm going to talk about in a second. But instead, at first, they tried to scapegoat just the school police chief. Now they realize, oh, that's not going to work. There was 400 cops there from all these different departments. Fine, we'll throw in the acting police chief of Uvalde as well. Why? Why are the guys on the ground being thrown to the wolves? Well, number one, they deserve it, absolutely, right? Number two, it's easy for them to say, oh, they were the commanding officer on the scene, or they were the incident officer on the scene. Okay, but how many times have you seen in the movies the state guys come in and they Bigfoot the local guys, or the federal guys come in and they Bigfoot the state guys? So could they have done that? Yes, in fact, they did do that. At the end, the Border Patrol went in. They Bigfooted everybody, right? But the failures of all those other cops are barely mentioned. Why? Because they have more power. And the Republicans love those cops, and the Republicans love how incompetent they are. So they don't want to talk about that. And there's a Texas House committee filled with Republicans. So they want to blame the lowest guys on the totem pole and go, we solved it, we solved it. Just don't get angry at us, because the further you go up that totem pole, the more it gets closer to those elected officials, okay? So now that's number one Achilles heel of this report, John. The other two are, well, you guys, of course, as always, they never talk about the training, right? So we train our cops to be cowards, and you see it in the evidence. So they very clearly said, well, we went and we were gonna try the door, but then we got fired at. So, obviously we wanted to protect ourselves. No, for cops, that shouldn't be obvious at all. You're supposed to protect us, not yourself. But if they were honest, this report would tell you every single police department in Texas tells their officers, protect yourself first. Who cares about the citizens? No one cares among the cops. Don't ever endanger your life for a lowly citizen. The cops are gold. No, don't do that. They would also talk about how cops are lazy. And that's standing around for over an hour in a dangerous situation. It's the most normal thing I've ever heard from a cop. I'm surprised they didn't all get donuts. So, and that's not just a stereotype. No, we've covered stories where they get reports of a robbery or a dangerous, a shooting, this, that, and other, and they go to 7-Eleven. They literally go get donuts, right? They don't care. They don't care. Because they're told you're not supposed to care. Just be as lazy as you possibly can. Don't solve any crime. Every once in a while, go beat up minorities. Call that policing. Come back and then say, you have your union protect you on every crappy thing you've ever done. But one last thing that's positive from the report: you get to see how awful the bureaucracy is in these situations. Because John, it made my blood boil. This is not political. This is just like on a human level. That all these jackasses are sitting around not talking to each other. I mean, it just, isn't it simple, like normal organizational process? Like if I was there, I would be like, who's in charge? Hey, okay, we've got all these different departments. How about this department? How about that? So I would bring the leaders together, and then I would say, okay, let's decide who the commanding officer is. No one even bothered to ask who's the commanding officer. That is just unbelievable. And it also goes to indifference. And God, John, sorry, one more thing. Let me list the number of officers from the different places, because they're only blaming the school police and the Uvalde police. 149 of the officers were from the United States Border Patrol, 14 were from the Department of Homeland Security, and 91 were from the Texas State Police. 91 Texas State Police cops sitting around going, I don't know, man, I'm not gonna risk my life. I was told that I'm much more important than the citizens. And the report barely touches the Texas State Police because they have more power.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And there's a ton more details in here that you can definitely find. We don't have time to dive into everything. It's just incompetence that's beyond parody about the keys and all this nonsense about the keys and whether we have a tool to open up the door. You have hundreds of guns, dozens of shotguns. You can open the door if you want to. And I'm not going to reiterate everything that I said in my coverage of this on the damage report this morning. I just want to make sure that I at least mention that while it is important to have this sort of report and to identify the flaws of individual cops or members of law enforcement, the breakdown of they might need or whatever, let alone identifying things that the teachers need to do or the better Wi-Fi they need to communicate with people. If you had solved every one of those problems the day before this, what you would have resulted in was a response that wouldn't be this comical. The cops would have gone in and they would have taken down the guy after he had killed many people. You still would have lost so many people because that is inevitable when people can walk into a store, buy an AR-15, and then walk into a school or a bar or an airport or a mall or whatever and start shooting. There will never be a police response fast enough to stop people from dying in that situation, likely many people. And the problem that I see here is us falling into like, oh, the cops were incompetent or oh, the cops were cowardly. So what's the solution? Competent cops or brave cops. No, that is not the solution to the problem. That's the solution to this problem. It's not a solution to somebody being able to gun down a dozen kids before the cops get there or multiple teachers before the cops get there. For that, we need to actually stop them from having the weapons that are capable of doing this sort of, I almost swore, this sort of stuff, I'll say. And if we fall into this trap of just believing that better cops or more alpha cops or better armed cops are the solution, that isn't gonna stop the shootings. It will result in more money going to the cops, which hardly seems like a solution to the problem.
All right, I just want to say two last things here. One is to give voice to our audience. Reggie K wrote in a super chat with a really good point. He said, maybe using hypnosis, making officers think it's an unarmed black man would have made them act immediately. Well, there's two truths in that. And they go to prove the point that I've been saying all along about this. One is, if you told the officers there, hey, the guy inside can't possibly hurt you, and they believe that, do you think that they wouldn't have gone in immediately? No, they would have, of course, gone in immediately if they thought they couldn't be harmed, which then goes to show you that 400 cops at the federal, state, and local level were all taught that their lives are more important than the kids' lives. That's not a thing that, 400 cowards showed up to a shooting. No, they were trained that their lives are more important. And you all know it for a fact, because if they thought they couldn't get hurt, they would have gone in the first minute. And then secondly, yeah, I mean, this is the 6th state of America. But if you told them, hey, there's a black guy inside and he's unarmed and you get to shoot him, they probably would have been in there lickety split.
Okay, why don't we transition to something very different, perhaps a bit more optimistic, at least in a weird way. Let's jump into this video.
Yes.
I don't want him to. I like what he stands for. I like what he does, but he upset too many people, and he upset him really bad. So I don't think he's good for the party.
That's a video that Fox Digital put out. They apparently went and decided we're going to interview a bunch of people who might on some level be Trump supporters. They definitely voted for him in the past, but now you've got potential alternatives. You've got Ron DeSantis. Do you really want Donald Trump to run again? And they decided, unless this is truly representative, at the very least, they're clipping out a bunch of former Trump fans that are not down with him anymore. And we want to show you a bit more of that.
You know what? I voted for him for my very first time. I voted for him. I don't think it'll be best for our country for him to run for re-election. You know, I'm thankful for everything that he's done, but I think that our Republican Party needs to be united.
At this point, he's a little too polarizing, and I think that there are candidates out there, Republican candidates, obviously, that maybe be able to pull in people that he would lose to be able to change this.
I would like to see, Governor DeSantis or someone like that, some new blood in the race.
DeSantis run for president, and if he wants to, then he can pick up Donald as the vice president.
100% DeSantis. There's no question about it.
Well, I'm a DeSantis fan as well. Donald Trump had a great run. I thought he was a great president while he was president. After the fact, I think we've seen a lot of divisiveness that's come from things, and I wouldn't vote for him in a primary, but the policy that he was able to do, I would probably vote for him in an election, but not a primary.
Some great points being made there. At this point, he's too divisive. At this point, in 2022, he finally reached the point of being too divisive. Not when he tried to overturn American democracy, not when he abandoned 1 million people to die in COVID, not the Mexicans are rapists point. None of those points, not the there's good people on both sides or the stand back and stand by. Now he's too divisive. Okay, I was wondering when he'd get there. But anyway, I do like some of the proposals there, Cenk, that sure, it's time to move to DeSantis, but if Donald really still wants to be in DC, he can be the vice president. I think I can see him going for that. What do you think?
Let's just say that that's the least likely scenario. Okay, all right, look, this is really important. Everything is, media is everything. And so without right-wing media, Donald Trump melts into a ball of orange wax. He's nothing without them. And look, if you watch the Young Turks, you know, A, how much I despise Donald Trump, but B, how I think that he has complete control over the Republican Party and has for the last 6 years. And any BS happy talk about, oh, Donald losing his power. You've heard me say dozens of times. No, that's just wishful thinking. That's projection. None of it is borne out by the polling. It's just not true. And it's like people in media are always thinking like, oh yeah, Republican voters think just like me and my friends in the cocktail circuit. No, they don't. No. Every time Donald Trump is more vicious and lies more and says terrible things, Republican voters like him more, not less, okay? But now, if right-wing media turns on him, and this is Fox News of all people, and we're gonna get to Joe Rogan as well, then he's toast. Because that's where people get their information. They don't magically acquire it from their sleep, as Ben Carson says. Aliens don't imprint it in their head. They get it from media. And if right-wing media tells you Trump is awesome, then they think Trump is awesome. If they start telling you he's dirt, yeah, that's gonna affect people. CNN doesn't affect Republican voters, but Fox News definitely does. Okay, yeah. And there's another important part of this, John. That's the first time I've seen Fox News MSNBC something, and it could make a big, big difference. So what do I mean by that? How do progressives lose? MSNBC comes in and tells older Democratic voters, oh my God, you might like progressives and you might really like their policies and you might like how they fight for you, but they're gonna lose. You can't lose to the Republicans. You have to vote for this guy who's 10 times worse. And well, because we're pretending he's the only one who can win. The polling shows the exact opposite, but it doesn't matter. We're gonna lie to you 24/7. And they do, and the older Democratic voters go, oh, okay, then I have to vote for the person who's worse and who's just like the Republicans, because otherwise we're gonna lose, we're gonna lose, we're gonna lose. And look at what you heard there on Fox News. For the first time, Republican voters are starting to worry that Trump's gonna lose, and they hate Democrats so much. The reason they love Trump is because they hate Democrats so much. But their hatred of Democrats might ironically lead them to vote for someone who isn't Donald Trump. And that would be good for the country.
Exactly, yeah, and they're only interested in Ron DeSantis again because of right-wing media, who has gone crazy about his absolute nonsense about CRT and trans athletes and all that. They ignore the fact that he doesn't give a damn about what happens in Florida, and thus they like him. And they're this worried about Trump as a candidate, even with Biden as the presumptive nominee. Imagine if there was a strong, likely Democrat who had a chance of, like, we think that Biden is about as weak as you could be. but they are worried about it. And as you alluded to, like there's multiple pieces of bad evidence really fast. I mean, it's not just the anecdotal evidence that they found. Fundraising, Donald Trump raised less money in the last 6 months than Ron DeSantis. He raised less than $50 million. DeSantis raised slightly more. So that's the money. We had talked maybe 6 months ago about some high-profile right-wing donors who had apparently been changing their mind. Now Donald Trump could fund himself for $1 billion if he wanted to, supposedly. Does he actually want to spend that money? No, he needs this donated money. And then also the polls. In an overall poll of registered Republicans, Trump's at 45, DeSantis is at 36. That's not where Trump wants DeSantis to be. In a New Hampshire poll recently, DeSantis was up 2 points over Donald Trump. That's one of their early primary states. So that has got to be scaring Donald Trump, and we will see what insane things he says as a result of that fear. But you alluded to a little bit beyond just Fox acknowledging the fact that people aren't that big fans of Trump. What about just casual mockery? Take a look at this clip from the Joe Rogan Experience.
The formula was like 2 good, 1 bad. So if they were going to give him bad news, they could go, you start with some good news. So they go, this is going well. Everybody's thrilled with you about this. Here's a bad thing. Also, people love you for this. So that's how they would tell him bad news. They couldn't just go, here's a bunch of bad news.
Of course.
Yeah.
He's a man baby.
He's a toddler. Yeah, he's a toddler. It's exactly how I talk to my kids about it.
So there was Joe Rogan talking with Tom Segura, and just he's a man baby. Now that's true, and the anecdote that they were talking about there isn't news, and it's hardly getting to like the core substantive concerns about Donald Trump and his position in the right-wing fascist movement and all that. But they feel like they can just throw out some casual insults against Donald Trump, and that's following from Cenk, a week or two ago when Joe Rogan was talking about how disinterested he was in Trump coming on his show.
Yeah. No, Trump's in a lot of trouble for the first time ever. If you've lost Rogan and you've lost Elon Musk and you've starting to lose Fox News, there aren't a lot of allies left. And so Trump's willingness to burn bridges was a huge positive for him. Because in politics, if you want to get things done, you've got to have carrots and sticks. Democrats only have sticks for progressives. For Republicans, they have carrots and feathers and pillows, right? And nothing but hearts and heart emojis and rainbows for Republicans. That's why they get killed, because they're super soft. But now when you've got all of these bridges that have been burned by Trump, at some point they've piled up and there's almost no bridges left. So he's having to fight 20 different right-wingers at the same time. And John, you're right, the mockery from Rogan is critical. So if like bros start seeing, and MAGA chudheads start seeing Trump as somebody who to be laughed at, there goes his main pillar, which is fake strength, right? Yep. Of course, in reality, he's the weakest man alive. I mean, you just look mean in his direction and he catches feelings and weeps for hours and lashes out like a child. But we've been calling him a man baby for 6 years because we were right. And finally Rogan catches on and but it's important. He's not gonna be able to beat Rogan and Musk and Fox News and all those guys combined. Nobody's that politically strong. So Trump is in actual trouble. But I wanna go back to one other thing you said, John, that's important. Biden beat Trump. Biden right now is in disastrous shape. There's only one Republican that Biden has a shot at beating. That's Donald Trump. Every other Republican on the planet will easily beat Biden. And that is going to be tough for Republican voters to ignore. You're gonna take a risk on the one guy who could lose to Biden, when if you pick anyone else, it's a guaranteed win. I don't know that even Republican voters are that dumb.
Perhaps we'll find out. Stay tuned. In any event, for now, we're going to take another break. When we come back, a little bit more to close out the hour, so don't go anywhere.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and John with you guys. Look, on some of the platforms, we do what's called a social break, and we read some of your comments. I was just doing one of those when I got cut off. I just wanted to finish that thought for those of you watching on those platforms. So somebody was saying, speculating maybe Manchin is threatening to switch sides to the Republicans. Yeah, of course, it's at least an implicit threat by Joe Manchin. But at this point, it's 100% irrelevant because he is now blocking everything the Democrats do. So if he switched over to being a Republican, we just have a little bit more honesty in politics. But in terms of policies and things that are passing, literally nothing would change. All right, because that's the excuse every BS artist, Democrat, ass kisser uses. Oh, what if they switch sides? Well, at this point, we have literally nothing left to lose.
Yeah. I don't know, like, why are they ever worried about Bernie switching sides? Do they ever give him everything they could possibly want? Anyway, the whole thing is entirely frustrating. But speaking of corrupt politicians, we've got some more to talk about in this story. The Pelosi household has been making some major moves in the stock market, and at a particularly interesting time considering some bills that'll be voted on in the near future. The husband of Nancy Pelosi, Paul Pelosi, purchased 20,000 shares worth between $1 and $5 million of Nvidia, one of the world's largest semiconductor companies, back on June 17th. That's according to a just released Speaker's financial disclosure form. That is, let's just be clear, a lot of money, even if you were as rich as Nancy Pelosi. Dropping that much money in one move for one individual tech company is a lot. And then wait until you find out what's been going on. At the same time, he sold 10,000 shares of Visa worth, again, between $1 million and $5 million. Sold 50 call options in Apple valued between $100,000 and $250,000. That's basically nothing for them. One of the stock trackers on Twitter that tracks these sorts of activities amongst a number of different politicians noted that Nvidia is up 10% since Nancy Pelosi filed. They sort of sarcastically say another win for Pelosi Capital, so nice for them. So here's the thing. Senators are gonna be convening as early as Tuesday to vote on a bipartisan competition bill, which allocates $52 billion to boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing and gives tax credits for production. Now, what's interesting is that as presently written, Nvidia wouldn't necessarily benefit too much from this. So AMD, Qualcomm, and Nvidia, 3 different companies that use semiconductors, they design their own chips, but they're not the ones who actually fabricate them. And so the subsidies to build plants or do tax support for the tools needed for the manufacturer wouldn't benefit them, they'd benefit people they work with. The economic benefit of that would be somewhat indirect. Right now, there's no design tax credit. So design houses, like the companies we've cited, wouldn't see a direct benefit. But apparently, they are considering potential changes. And either way, it is possible that a company like Nvidia could see a big boost after a bill like this passes. Even if it doesn't directly funnel a bunch of money to them, it's easy to imagine the tech sector at large getting a big boost. But if there are changes to the bill that specifically benefit companies like Nvidia, then this could be a major financial payoff for the Pelosi household. And considering all that we've talked about, Cenk, recently about the individual politicians, their family members being able to buy individual stocks based potentially in part on the information they're getting behind closed doors, this seems suspect. What do you think?
Yeah, that Nancy Pelosi stock tracker thing is no joke. Like, I'm literally thinking of investing based on it, because one, it has an unbelievable rate of return over decades. Gee, I wonder if knowing exactly which bills are gonna pass helps with insider trading. And if it's public what her husband's putting the money into, well, it's not like they didn't have a conversation. It's not like he doesn't know the odds of the bills passing. He does. And it's not like no matter how rich you are, that you're gonna gamble $5 million without a high degree of certainty. Okay, maybe if all of us start buying the same stocks Pelosi does, it'll become so market moving that like even reporters in America might have to notice the corruption. Because normally, of course, mainstream media reporters are the very last people who would know anything about politics. So they're like, Nancy Pelosi makes money off of the things that she legislates. No, we're told she's a master legislator. No, you tell us that. You're the one who did that nonsense. Anyways, so that's point one. Point two, guys, is that the semiconductor bill, I'll tell you right now, if you want to invest based on it, that's up to you. I have no idea if the price have already gone up for those stocks, so be careful in anything that you do that's financial. But I told you this from day one, and I will never waver from it. The semiconductor bill will pass, and it will pass easily. And you'll hear a lot of stories, and we've already covered some, where there'll be fake drama like, oh, they're not sure they can get that person's vote. Oh, McConnell's holding out. Oh, Manchin's waiting for something else. And oh, Manchin wants this and Sinema wants that. Nonsense, blah, 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 blah. It's going to the donors. It's gonna pass easily. It has about a 100% chance of passing. Anything that gives billions of dollars, and this gives $52 billion to both Republican and Democratic donors directly. You take our money, they're gonna take your money. You're gonna take your tax money and hand it over to giant corporations. Oh, that'll pass in Washington super easy. So don't believe any of the fake drama. And the thing that you should believe most of all is what Nancy Pelosi invests in, because that's gonna happen.
Exactly. That said, don't take any advice based on things that we say. Just let's be clear about that. Now, a lot of people concerned about Nancy Pelosi, what just happened here with her husband. Well, she responded saying, the speaker does not own any stocks as a spokesperson. As you can see from the required disclosures with which the speaker fully cooperates, these transactions are marked SP for spouse. The speaker has no prior knowledge or subsequent involvement in any transactions. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Because I think what generally happens in marriages is that one spouse decides to pay millions and millions of dollars for a particular set of stocks for one tech company without any conversation whatsoever. And look, it's easy enough for us to speculate that he might have maybe overheard from the speaker, who again, he's married to, that the bill might succeed and thus it would be to his benefit to have this stock, but also understand the risk. If she was sure that it wasn't going to pass, if he were to buy the stock right now, that in theory could really tank the stock price. Would he take a risk like that at this particular moment unless he had insider information? And so, look, I think you could go way beyond just worrying about spouses getting information. But the idea that they don't talk about this is as laughable as the idea that Clarence Thomas isn't talking with his wife about January 6th. Like, we get to choose if we are gullible enough, stupid enough to accept a BS explanation like that. I, for one, am not. I don't buy it. It's corruption. It shouldn't be allowed. It should literally be outlawed. It should not be up to them. We can and should regulate them when they do this. But I have a feeling, Cenk, that if anyone asks Martha Raddatz about it, she's going to accept what the distinguished speaker had to say.
Yeah, the stock picks in the Pelosi household are the anti-Bruno. They talk about it. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so my reaction to that spokesperson's comments that, oh, her spouse's incredible track record in picking stocks based on bills that are gonna pass over decades has nothing to do with what your plain eyes are seeing. It's just coincidence. My reaction to that is, and that should be the reaction of any journalist, but they all dutifully write it down. Oh, headline, Pelosi says she had nothing to do with it. She's perfectly innocent. Innocent as the driven snow. She's the greatest legislator of all time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I throw out one more stat, one more figure? I know we're running out of time. So this is according to Larry Kudlow. According to reports, Nancy Pelosi and her husband Paul traded over $50 million in assets back in 2020, with annualized returns at 69% as of October. That is not what most people get from the stock market. I'll just say that. You don't get 69%. It's nice, but you don't get it.
Unless you're married to the Speaker of the House, who has information on exactly how many billions of dollars are going to be transferred legally from one place to another, from mainly from taxpayers to specific corporations. Come on, this whole thing's a joke, and everyone in America would know how corrupt Nancy Pelosi is. And by the way, also Mitch McConnell and all of them, all of those dirty, dirty politicians. That made them sound better for a second. Anyway, if the press ever did their job, but the refs are constantly like, what foul? I don't see any foul. Go get a big guy so I have access. Oh, yes, the status quo is protected. Okay.
That's unfortunately probably all the time we have.
Yeah, that's all the time we have. All right, guys, Francesca's next. We have amazing stories in the second hour, including, look, the Saudis get in Biden's grill, and twist of all twists, they're right. Interesting. And then if you're a member, you're gonna love the bonus episode today, Turks versus Sharks. TYT.com/join. Everybody check out Damage Report, John's excellent show, and we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.